presidential nominee. You see these reports, Senator. It must be so frustrating. Here's the bottom line question. Do you have confidence in Nouri al-Maliki, the prime minister of Iraq, that he's doing the right thing?
I do not. And it's ironic that the president and vice president taking victory laps while the government in Iraq unravels more rapidly than I thought, but I thought it would unravel, and simply because we did not maintain a residual force of some 20,000 troops, which we should have, which the Obama administration would never agree to a specific number, and now the president's re-election campaign is already putting out propaganda saying promises kept. It's really a low point, in my view, in the history of American involvement in national security affairs.
You know the other argument, Senator McCAIN, and this is the one the Obama administration makes, that Nouri al-Maliki's government would never accept immunity for those 20,000 or whatever residual troops that were going to remain in Iraq. And the U.S., the Pentagon, was not going to let U.S. troops stay there unless they had immunity from prosecution on the part of the Iraqi government.
Here's the following facts. After seeing President Barzani, Alawi, and in meeting with Prime Minister Maliki, Senator Graham and I, Maliki said yes, he would accept American troops and would work with other parties to make it happen. And then he asked Ambassador Jeffords and General Austin, how many troops do you want? They said, we don't know. We're still working on that. That was last May. We never gave them a number. And the president's campaign promise was he'd get everybody out of Iraq. He got everybody out of Iraq. It could have been entirely differently. And any close observer, such as General McCAIN and many others who knew what was going on in Iraq, knows that the United States was never serious about keeping a residual force in Iraq and in keeping with the president's campaign promise.
The president did make a campaign promise when he was running against you. He wanted to get all U.S. troops out of Iraq, and he says he was living up to that campaign promise. But here's another factor, and it concerns me. There are still about 17,000 Americans in Iraq right now, half sort of diplomatic personnel, support staff, the other half formal contractors, military contractors, civilians, hired by the U.S. government. I'm worried about their safety. I don't know if I should be, but you've been there on many occasions. How worried should we be about the security of these Americans who are still there?
I think you should be deeply concerned, especially since Sadr, who is part of al-Sadr, who you know is part of the government, has said he would view American embassy personnel as, quote, occupiers. And can we carry out reconstruction projects and do the things we need to do to help the Iraqis if the government is fragmenting and there's a return to sectarian violence, which there are signs of? I regret to say all these things, Wolf, because the Iraqi people deserve better. The families of 4,700 and 474 young Americans who died there deserve better. But this could have been avoided and should have been avoided.
Let me move on to Afghanistan right now, because some controversial comments by the Vice President Joe Biden in the new issue of Newsweek magazine on the Taliban. And let me read to you and our viewers, I'll put it up on the screen, what he says about the Taliban. He says, the Taliban per se is not our enemy. That's critical. There is not a single statement that the president has ever made in any of our policy assertions that the Taliban is our enemy because it threatens U.S. interests. The vice president saying, you know what, go ahead, you got to negotiate peace with someone. You negotiate peace with your enemy, if you will. Al-Qaeda is an enemy, but the Taliban not necessarily. What say you?
I say I'm flummoxed. I say that the men and women who are serving, I'm already hearing from them by Twitter and many other means. One of them says, one who's over there in Afghanistan now, quote, well, if they aren't the enemy, who's been shooting at us all this time? It's just bizarre. But it's not quite as bizarre as you might think, because the administration now is placing their eggs in the basket of some kind of an agreement with the Taliban for a ceasefire and some kind of reconciliation. Well, when one of our friends was in Pakistan a few weeks ago and said to the president of Pakistan, "Do you think we'll get peace with the Taliban?" and the president of Pakistan said, "Why should they? you're leaving. And there's even Reuters news report, that we are willing to release some Taliban prisoners in Guantanamo as a, quote, confidence-building measure. I mean, this is really, really incredible stuff that they are doing. The Taliban will agree to a peace settlement when they believe they are beaten, not when they believe that we are leaving.
Let me move on to North Korea, and I'm going to show our viewers your reaction to the death of Kim Jong-il and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's reaction in a formal statement. First, what you said in your written statement, you said, "I can only express satisfaction that the dear leader," that's Kim Jong-il, "is joining the likes of Gaddafi, bin Laden, Hitler, and Stalin in a warm corner of hell." All right, that was your statement, part of your statement at least. Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State last night, a very different tone. Among other things, she says, "We are deeply concerned with the well-being of the North Korean people, and our thoughts and prayers are with them during these difficult times." Your reaction to what the Secretary of State said, would you regard that as a formal statement of condolence to the North Koreans?
I think I would view it as a formal statement of condolence, but the fact is that this guy starved, beaten, tortured. His people, the largest gulag on earth, is now in North Korea. The incredible brutality inflicted on his own people, as I said, earns him a very warm place in hell. The people who can beneficially affect this situation, which is very tense right now, is China. China is the country that should be acting mature, should be acting as a world power, and should be making sure that with this transition period to, by the way, what the Wall Street Journal describes as a sadist, Kim Jong-un, that things do not erupt into what could be a conflict or increased tensions between North and South Korea. China should realize that a united Korea poses no threat to China, and they should not be propping up a regime of this nature. And finally, we saved the taxpayers, I think, some millions of dollars again of food aid that we were going to give to North Korea. We've seen this movie several times before, in returns for them to return to the six-party talks or the four-party talks or the two-party talks, and then, of course, they would fail again because the North Koreans are not about to give up their nuclear capability. So we may have been saved some millions of dollars. There should be a reunification of the Korean Peninsula. It should be done gradually with democratic and free people, and China can make that happen.
All right, very quickly on another subject, the payroll tax cut extension. You were among the 89 senators who voted to continue it for another 2 months. Your Republican colleagues in the House, the leader, the speaker, the majority leader, say they're not going to go along with that. Why are they wrong, and you and your Republican colleagues in the Senate right?
I think we have to recognize reality, and that is we are not going to see the payroll tax cut expire on the 1st of January. And we have to accommodate to that reality. It would not be fair to the American people at this time. And so it seems to me that Republican leaders and Harry Reid and the Speaker and Congresswoman Pelosi should sit down together with the administration and figure out a way through this. It is harming the Republican Party. It is harming the view, if it's possible, anymore, of the American people about Congress. And we got to get this thing resolved, and with the realization that the payroll tax cut must remain in effect.
Senator McCain.
Not to mention the to mention the doc fix and the unemployment insurance. Yes.
Of course, we're going to have a lot more on this part of the story coming up at the top of the hour. Senator, as usual, thanks very much for coming in. We got through a lot.
Thank you.
New polling shows the Republican frontrunners trailing President Obama among likely voters. Our strategy session is next.